Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. It's your host, Marissa, and we are rolling into season 4 of the podcast. I can't believe that we have gone through 4 seasons together, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to help you along your wellness journey this year. Now, I couldn't do this podcast without the help of some incredible experts, and I can't wait to share with you the lineup we have this year. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. It's officially February, and we all know February as the love month, but in the wellness industry, it is also the time to bring awareness to heart health. One of the leading causes of death in Canadians is heart disease, and when I was researching this further, one of the main causes that stuck out to me was that heart disease is more common in those who are deficient in omega-3s. Consuming different types of fats has become a controversial topic in regards to heart health, which is why I've asked our friends Darren Wright and Gifford to join us back on the podcast today to chat about how omega-3s can in fact help to reduce the risk of developing heart disease. Before we get into the details about omega-3s and heart health, join me in welcoming back Darren and Diana to the podcast. Hello, Darren. Happy New Year. How are you doing today?
Doing very good, Marissa, and very glad to be back with you again today.
Great. So you're joining us to speak to one of our favorite supplement companies, Certified Naturals. So can you give our listeners a brief intro about Certified Naturals?
Sure, Marissa. I think this is our third time on your fantastic podcast now. And for those just learning about us for the first time, Certified Naturals is a Canadian-based and Canadian-made line of supplements. And what makes Certified different than most other brands on the market is that every single one of our formulations is powered by a key clinically studied patented ingredient. And when we talk about clinical studies, we mean human clinical trials. And today, we'll certainly be talking about one of those special ingredients on the podcast. And while these are natural supplements, we like to bring scientific backing to our offering so that consumers know they have the best chance at making a difference in their lives. And that's really why we call the brand Certified. Each supplement is certified by human clinical research.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to be chatting more about Certified Naturals and specifically their omega-3 supplement in this episode. But before we get into that, I want to welcome on our second guest of today, and that's Diana Gifford Jones. Good morning, Diana. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Marissa. I'm great. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to give you a very specific measure of that. You know how people say they're feeling like they're a 7 or an 8 or even a 9. Well, I am an 11.64. And you're going to have to wait a little later in the discussion to understand what I mean about that.
I can't wait to hear more about that. That sounds very interesting. But Diana, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself and also your father, who is Dr. W. Gifford Jones?
Absolutely, Marissa. Thanks. You know, it's really my father who deserves the attention here. He's probably very well known to your audience, some of whom may have been reading his health column for years. As you said, you know, his pen name is W. Gifford Jones. And I am so happy to say that he is turning 98 years old this month.
Wow.
In Heart Health Month. It's a great month for him to have a birthday. So he's 98 years old now this month. And it was way back in 1974 that he started writing his column about common sense health. And was his form of medicine, you know, that form that advises steer clear of medications if you can. I'm sure that's what has gotten him to 98 years of age. Years ago, he wrote a book called 90 Plus, How I Got There. And I had to tell him to give that book an update. But it was really, a compilation of his story of longevity. And now I have the daunting task of working with him and hoping to carry forward the Gifford Jones approach to no nonsense health that he's offered for so long. One fun story I'd like to tell your audience before we get into the discussion. I was talking with my father just yesterday afternoon, asking him what he would tell people about omega-3. And he immediately recalled an article he wrote years ago about his time as an early career researcher when he spent the summer up in one of Ontario's northern lakes, and he was studying fish populations. And in this article that he wrote, he mentioned that if he were choosing his final meal on this planet, it would be one of those freshly caught yellow pickerels that he cooked over the campfire back that summer. And wouldn't you know it, yesterday as well, my mother had just gone to the grocery store to pick him up exactly that, a pickerel fillet for his dinner. And so when I left him yesterday afternoon, he was cooking that pickerel fillet at the stove. And I can assure you, he was thinking about how good it was going to taste, but also about heart health as he ate that fish, no doubt. Marissa, in my case, I am somewhat now of a health journalist, writing the weekly column with my dad. And when I'm not doing that, I'm engaged with a wide range of university-based health sciences, including a Brain and Mind Institute that's conducting research in neuroscience, and an Institute for Global Health and Development, where, among other things, the focus is on the impact of climate change in people's health.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story about your dad and yesterday. I think that's just so fitting for what we're going to talk about today. So it's just the perfect timing of that conversation. I love that. So thank you both for joining me today. And let's kind of jump into talking more about omegas and healthy fats. So we know that fats can be a controversial topic when it comes to heart health, but I do truly believe that this is due to a lack of actually understanding the different types of fats. And there are many different types of fats. What people will mostly know is unsaturated fat, which we know as the good fats. That includes our omega-3s. Also, there's saturated fats, which tend to be sometimes more processed fats and also contain omega-6. And then also we have the trans fats, which are the ones we know we want to stay away from. But what we see in society is that there is an overconsumption of trans fat and also saturated fat. And that will also lead to a deficiency in the unsaturated fats in our omega-3s. So I believe we're seeing these deficiencies due to a lot of lifestyle factors, a lot of people who are sedentary and also making maybe poor dietary choices. But when I did some further research into cardiovascular health in particular and dietary fat, there was a trial run, and that trial showed that by replacing a diet that's rich in carbohydrates with a diet that's rich in unsaturated fats, there was some results of lowering blood pressure, improving lipid levels, and also reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease. I know it seems like a straightforward approach to our heart health, but we know that there are so many people who are struggling with changing your diet. And we've talked about that on a previous podcast episode as well, that it's not always accessible or easy for people to change their diets and their lifestyle. So I want to kind of dive into that in this episode and share with our listeners ways in which they can start to change their lifestyle and their dietary habits to help to reduce cardiovascular disease, and specifically highlighting omega-3s. So my first question is, I want to talk a little bit about unsaturated fats in particular. So we know these as our essential fatty acids, which mean our body cannot create them. We have to consume them through our diets. Now, there's two types of essential fatty acids that people are often confused by, omega-3s and omega-6s. Can we start by talking about the difference between those two and what they actually do for the body?
Well, let's reinforce the very basics, Marissa. And to start, this is a really important fact. Fats are necessary. They're a necessary component to a healthy diet. Whether you're eating vegan or paleo, or if you're an omnivore, you need fat in your diet. And there's a misconception about dietary intake of fats. People often think that when we choose a certain food, we're only eating one type of fat. But the truth is that most foods with fat in them contain a mix of different fats. Some foods are obviously higher in one kind of fat over another kind of fat, but we tend to associate certain foods like butter with a specific type of fats, in this case, saturated fat. But in reality, you're also getting monounsaturated fat when you eat butter. And knowing which food sources are high in different kinds of fat can help you choose foods that are higher in the heart healthy, the monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and lower in the saturated and trans fats. So the main message is place more emphasis on the types of fat you're eating and less on the amount of fat you're getting in your diet. It might also be helpful to note that our bodies actually need both omega-3s and omega-6. Each of these fatty acids has a role to play in our metabolism. They are important structural components of cell membranes, for example, and they are a source of energy. As we learn more and more about complex science involved in how our bodies work, we've discovered that omega-3 fatty acids are extremely important, for example, in children to the normal physical development of their brains and eyes and nerves. And in adults, they have been consistently shown to lower blood markers of inflammation, which is crucial for heart health. But omega-3s and omega-6s are also different. And in modern Western diets, and in fact, in diets in most places around the world now, omega-6 fatty acids typically outnumber omega-3s by a factor of 10 or more. And that's the problem. It's this imbalance that is so unfortunate, because omega-3s provide a host of health benefits, from anticoagulant effects in the blood to reduced inflammation throughout the body. But when these omega-6s are overabundant in the food we eat, they have bad behaviors, you could say, that block omega-3s from doing their good work. So keep this notion of the balance between different types of fatty acids in mind when we talk in a moment about Certified Naturals omega-3X.
So in particular to omega-3 fatty acids, can we break that down a little bit farther? Because we know that there's two compounds, EPA and DHA. What are these two compounds and why are they beneficial?
Sure. Actually, there's three types of omega-3s, and each one has one of those long, impossible names. The first one is a fatty acid found in plant oils called ALA for short. And it's commonly found in flax seeds, but also in many other plant sources. And there are two other oils found in marine fish, and we commonly refer to these as EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA are the ones that are found in the cold water fatty fish.
Okay. And before we talk about supplementation, I do want to talk about food first, because I think that's obviously a huge factor in getting omega-3s into your diet. What food sources have the highest amount of omega-3 and that you believe people should be consuming on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, it's those marine fish. Good examples would be salmon, herring, sardines, mackerel. And this is where it gets interesting. I don't blame people for being confused and wondering if they're getting enough of these fatty acids through the fish that they're eating, because if you look at the various recommendations for how much would be good, they tend to say things like 8 ounces of seafood each week. And so if you're wondering whether you're getting 8 ounces of seafood each week, you may be wondering, how do you measure out the right amount of fish? What does that look like in the pan? If you're cooking it, are you leaving all the rich fish oils in the skillet when you fry it? Are you introducing trans fats when you cook it in butter? There's lots of questions about whether you're getting those omega-3 in your diet in sufficient amounts, as might be the recommendations of national guidelines.
So with those factors in mind about cooking, also, I'm sure like where the fish come from, the size of the fish, that will all have a factor in that as well. Do you think it's possible for people to get enough omega-3s through their diet alone?
Well, I would have answered this question differently a while back, saying, sure, you can eat a lot of fish and get that amount that you're needing. But this is where let's return to that amazing number I gave you a little earlier of 11.64. And we'll explain that in a second. But I certainly felt myself that I was getting plenty of fish in my diet. And I think as Darren will describe in a moment, we've got some pretty compelling evidence to show that even if you're eating a lot of fish, you may not be getting the omega-3s you need.
And certainly, Marissa, to answer your question, is it possible to get enough omega-3 in the diet? It is, but it's not easy. And the reason we know this is because of a measurement called the omega-3 index. And that was a measurement developed in 2004 by researchers in the USA, notably Dr. Bill Harris. And this doctor and his associates were able to link the amount of omega-3, so the amount of EPA and DHA in a person's blood, and they were able to link it together with what their risk of coronary heart disease would be. So basically, patients are doing a blood test where their total omega-3 percentage is determined, and that's a good indication of what we'll find in the organs, but of course that's hard to test for. And ultimately, that's where we want the omega-3s to get. And what they found was that if your total blood omega content is below 4%, you're at high risk for coronary heart disease. If you're between 4 and 8%, you're at moderate risk. And only if you're above 8% are you at low risk of coronary heart disease. So that really gives us some standards of what we need to get from omega-3s to be healthy. And Marissa, I would ask you, knowing that 4% or lower is high risk, 8% or higher is low risk of coronary heart disease, what would your guess be as to what the Canadian average is?
That's a great question. I'm just through my own personal experience with seeing clients for nutrition, but I also work closely with a cardiovascular clinic in Peterborough. And I would say majority of Canadians are definitely deficient in omega-3s, which I think do contribute to a lot of cardiovascular disease. But I would say like probably most Canadians would be in that lower 4% mark.
Well, luckily not quite that bad, but you're very close. They are deficient. Canadians on average, in a Statistics Canada study where over 2,000 Canadians did a blood test, the average was 4.5%. So barely above the high risk category. And what it also showed was that only 3% of Canadians were above that magic 8% level where we really want people to be at low risk. So you could turn that around and say that 97% of the Canadian population does not have optimal omega-3 levels, which is quite frightening. And when I say it is possible, we know it's possible because in countries such as Japan and South Korea, where they have high consumption of omega-3 rich fish, those countries on average are well above the magic 8% number, with South Korea in particular being over 11%. So yes, it can be done, but in Canada, it's not being done.
Yes, yes.
And one of the issues is, you might say, well, no problem, just recommend that people in Canada eat more fish, or they could take fish oil supplements. And interestingly, that study also looked at those populations, and they found that even Canadians eating fish twice a week, 93% of those were not getting enough omegas. And of Canadians taking fish oil supplements, still 90% were not getting enough. So clearly, eating fish and taking supplements can help, but in Canada, we're still not getting enough.
That's a high percentage of people that are deficient in omegas. That's absolutely crazy to think about, that high number. But in terms of getting a test done to see the deficiencies, what medical tests should somebody be asking for to see where their EPA and DHA blood levels sit?
Diana will talk a little bit more about it because she had a personal experience with doing testing, but there is a company in the US, Omega Quant, and you can find their website, www.omegaquant.com, and they offer a variety of omega-3 tests, and one is very basic. It will tell you your omega-3 index and where you rank, so that if you need to make changes, that's something one can do. So it can be ordered here in Canada.
Now, I haven't personally tested the Certified Naturals Clinical Omega-3 X, but I have heard some incredible feedback, especially from Ada. And I know that you both endorse this product. So what makes this fish oil in particular so superior compared to a lot of other fish oils on the market?
As we saw from the statistics, Canadians are clearly not getting enough omegas, and there's really two issues. Number one, not eating enough omega-rich food. And of course, we don't eat the right parts of the fish, the skin and the eyes that are so rich in omega-3s, which they would eat in Asia. The other issue when we're talking about supplements is absorption. And of course, anytime you have an oil, like a fish oil that you're taking into your body, the human body is 60% water, and we know oil and water don't mix well. But the human body has tools to help us digest oils. So our typical fish oils on the market, on the supplement shelves, would tend to be ethyl esters or triglycerides. And how a fish oil is usually digested, you need several organs in order to help facilitate absorbing that fish oil. So first, we get the fish oil come into our system. We need to break up the large fat molecules into smaller particles. And the liver does that by producing bile salts, and it breaks the large fat particles into micelles. And then we need the intervention of the pancreas, which produces enzymes to break down those fats into a format that our body actually absorbs. So specifically, the enzyme lipase is needed to break down those micelles. And when that lipase is dealing with fish oils, they get broken down into free fatty acids and monoglycerides. And that is actually the form that we absorb through our gastrointestinal tract. So to deal with this issue, because many people don't, their pancreas or their liver is not in optimal health and they're not breaking down fish oils well, to deal with this, some researchers in Quebec developed a form of fish oil that could bypass those inherent challenges that the body has in breaking down and absorbing fish oils. And that fish oil is called Maximil, and it's one of the few Canadian developed and researched natural ingredients on the market. And this is the oil that we use in our certified naturals omega-3X formula. And really, Marissa, the oil is not so different than others on the market in terms of the sourcing. It's made from anchovies, sardines, mackerels. It's processed and cleaned in Norway, which is really the world's leader in fish oil technology. But it's the last step that makes Maximil so unique. And really what this oil is it's pre-digested. So the oil is pre-treated with an enzymatic process, very similar to what happens in our body. And the enzyme lipase is used to pre-digest the oil, which changes it from an ethyl ester, which is your typical fish oil, into a monoglyceride form. And if you remember when we talked about what the body actually absorbed, it's a monoglyceride. So your body is getting the form of fish oil that we need for direct absorption to bypass the problem areas that we have in digesting fish oil. And really, the clinical studies have backed up that absorption. They've shown that when you take a monoglyceride oil like Maximil, it's 3 times more absorbable than a typical fish oil. It enters the bloodstream quicker and stays in the blood longer, so it's better able to get to the organs.
That's amazing. And I think not enough people are considering digestion as a concern when we're talking about supplementation, because there's so many pieces as to the absorption, and the better digestion and better absorption we have in products, the quicker we're going to see the results, which means the quicker we're not going to have so many Canadians deficient in omega-3 and also potentially suffering with cardiovascular disease. So that's amazing. In terms of the fish oil in particular, one of the most common questions I get is reflux and fishy repeat. Will people experience that with this fish oil?
So as you mentioned, Marissa, taking fish oil is not always a pleasant experience. Either they're dealing with fishy taste or reflux, or the capsules these days tend to be so big, a lot of the seniors have trouble swallowing them. So omega-3X is in a capsule form, so of course they're not going to get any fishy taste in the mouth. But when it comes to reflux or burp back that many people experience using fish oil, that same absorption that we just talked about with Maximil oil, making it better absorbed by being a monoglyceride, that helps avoiding some of the digestive issues that most people have with fish oil. So in our experience in over 2.5 years having this product on the market is that even people that have chronic issues with fish oil and having reflux are not experiencing that with Maximil oil.
Awesome. That's good to know. It's the most common concern I have with people. So that's perfect. Now, is there any risk of contamination of heavy metals or toxins with this fish oil in particular?
Whenever we talk about fish oil, of course, you've got a natural product coming from our oceans. So we always have to be concerned about that. With Maximil oil that we use in the certified naturals omega-3X, it is sourced from anchovies, sardines, and mackerel, which are smaller fish. So they're less likely to contain heavy metals and toxins. But even though we use molecular distillation to concentrate and clean the oil before we use the patented Maximil process on it, we do further testing on it to assure consumers that the product is going to be safe. So there's a program called the International Fish Oil Standards Group, and it's run out of the University of Guelph here in Canada. And they offer the opportunity for brands from around the world to send in their oils to be independently tested by their standards. And they look at things like potency, they look at freshness, and they look at the toxins that you mentioned. And they actually rate all their oils that come in on a 5-star system. 5 stars would be an exceptional quality fish oil. 1 star would be a poor quality fish oil. And we've been testing our Maximil oil for 2.5 years now, and I'm pleased to say that we've received the maximum 5 out of 5 stars, which is great. The other aspect is with a program like this, which consumers can find at www.ifosprogram.com, they can look up products from around the world and actually see the testing results. So for example, if you have a bottle of certified naturals omega-3X, you can look at the bottom of the bottle or the bottom of the carton and look up a lot number, go to that website and actually see the test results for that particular batch. So that really is a way of giving extra assurance to consumers that the oil is safe.
Absolutely. So for consumers, what you're looking for on this product, you'll see as a certified stamp on the certified naturals product is the IFOS, so IFOS, blue and white. And I really encourage listeners to go and check this website out, because I think the ability to see the transparency of fish oil in particular is so amazing, to see where your product's coming from, the potency, as you said, the testing that's being done. It just speaks to the brand and the product of itself. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. I have another question in terms of the certified naturals omega-3X. In terms of cardiovascular support in particular, what dosage would you be suggesting for someone who's looking to prevent cardiovascular disease?
So of course, it really depends what one is trying to achieve. On our Health Canada approved labels, we recommend a range of 1 to 3 gel caps a day. And specifically, if you're looking at lowering triglycerides, you want to take at least 2 gel caps a day. But of course, it also depends if you've done the omega-3 testing and if you know that you are low in omega-3s and at risk for coronary heart disease. So it's best to follow the science. And what the science says with the Maximil oil is that by taking 3 capsules a day for a period of 2 months, consumers can actually bring their omega-3 index to at least 8%. And that's where we have some real life examples of testing that we've done. So I'll invite Diana to share her personal story of testing omega-3 levels.
Both my father and I take the business of supporting products seriously, and so we wanted to find our own results about not only where we are just from eating a healthy diet on a daily basis, but what would be the results of taking this product. So we did before and after tests with the omega-3 index, and And I think both my father and I were astounded to discover that our before test didn't look too good in terms of risk. My father suffered a heart attack at the age of 74, a bad one. And so he's been paying high level attention to heart health ever since. And his before test showed he was only showing 5.56 on the omega-3 index. And my own test was even worse at 5.47. We subsequently both, for 2 months, took 3 pills a day, 3 capsules a day. And, that's where we're going to get to this wonderful number. I mean, I think I was a poster child for this product because my results after supplementation went up to 11.64. And in my father's case, he achieved 9.64. So we were both well into the healthy range, and obviously thoroughly convinced by the results that these are that diet alone isn't going to work for us and that we need to have supplementation.
That's amazing results in such a short amount of time, really, to see that turnaround. So that's incredible. Can you just remind our listeners what that test is called, the name of it?
Yeah, it's the omega-3 index that the results come on. And Darren, maybe you could remind everyone the source for the Omega Quant test kits themselves.
Yeah, so Omega Quant is the company that does the testing. They are based in South Dakota, which is not so convenient for us in Canada, but the nice thing is we can go online and it is available. They do ship the test across the border, so it's available at www.omegaquant.com, and they get it out to you quickly. You do your test. It does involve taking some blood and then sending it back to them, and then within about 2 weeks they send you back an email with your test results, so you can really see where you're at and see if supplementation is something you need, or whether you just need a bit more fish in your diet. You can make that evaluation, and certainly you can do a second test at some future time to see if the changes you've made have made a significant difference in your coronary outlook.
Absolutely. So I'll leave the link for that information below. But in general, if we think back to when we talked about the stats in this episode, regardless if someone is going to go ahead and take a test to see their starting and after point, some people will be loving that information, but some people might be a little bit more hesitant. I still think it's really important for people to be supplementing with omega-3s after hearing those stats about how 97% of us are deficient in omegas. And there's many other health conditions and concerns aside from cardiovascular health that we can see that ours is a reflection of omega deficiencies, like skin conditions, eczema, inflammation, psoriasis. Those are all other big topics we're not going to get into today, but also relate to a deficiency in omegas. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to incorporate more fish into their diet if that's possible, or start to supplement with a maintenance dosing of the Certified Naturals Clinical Omega-3X, which if you do want to pick up that product, you can find that at any of our Joanne's Place locations. And I want to thank you, Darren and Diana. Thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast. You're both a wealth of information and experience, and I know that our listeners and myself really appreciate your time and your expertise. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thanks, Marissa.
If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.